On this episode of Militaria at the Museum, we open the pages of a First World War diary from an early Royal Canadian Navy serviceman. Next, we honor Brigadier General Ned Amy by examining his meticulously preserved uniforms. Finally, we journey to Stanley Airport to uncover the stories of the Dambusters. Beyond museum exhibits lies a hidden realm of archived artifacts that hold the keys to unlocking intriguing stories from the past. Come along as I meet with experts at the Army, Naval, and Aviation museums, where I've been granted special access to pull back the curtains and reveal the secrets of their militaria. My name is Sandy Hiltz, and all my life I've been captivated by military history. Now, I have the rare opportunity to explore a collection of fascinating military artifacts on Militaria at the Museum. At the Naval Museum, we'll uncover First World War diaries from a Royal Canadian Navy serviceman. These rare personal narratives provide a unique window into the human experience of war and the early days of the Royal Canadian Navy that offer insights that official records cannot capture. I understand you have some journals of a Sub-Lieutenant McDermott you'd like to show me.
So Sub-Lieutenant McDermott served in the Royal Navy Reserve from 1914 to 1918. He was only 17 when he joined, and during his time of service, he kept these diaries where he wrote entries about specific events and his time on the ship. There are some funny ones and also some somber ones as well.
Oh, that sounds really fascinating. Could you tell me a little bit more about McDermott, not only in terms of his naval service, but also as an individual?
Of course. So McDermott joined the Royal Navy Reserve in 1914, and shortly after the HMS Calgarian was hired by the Admiral, he was on that ship. He was on the HMS Calgarian until March 28, 1917, so he did about 3 years on there. After that, he was on the HMS Magnificent. He was only on there about 2 months before he was transferred to the HMS Albemarle. And from there in 1918, he was transferred to the HMS Sunflower, where he finished his time in the First World War. We don't really know too much about who he is as an individual. His diaries focus more about his experiences. Unfortunately, due to the fact that he is British and his rank isn't that high up, he starts off as midshipman before he's promoted to sub-lieutenant later in his career. There isn't much to go off of. We can find him in the Royal Navy Navy lists, which are books just listing every single person that has ever joined their Navy. But other than that, he is quite a difficult person to keep track of.
Knowing that the keeping of a diary was sort of discouraged, how rare are diaries like this?
These are very rare, especially that they are over 100 years old. So not only were they not allowed these journals on board, but also just the events that have happened in these are very traumatic. Not many people want to discuss this, and due to their age, they're very fragile, so they might not stand the test of time. It's extremely rare to have something from the First World War, especially from the Navy, due to the fact that the First World War had a focus primarily on the Army. I think these diaries hold a high value to archivists and just the general population due to the fact that it tells us the day-to-day life of these sailors and what they would have experienced during their time at sea.
I must say, given the age of these, they do seem to be in very good condition.
Yeah, the museum, we tend to try to keep our best practices, so these journals aren't handled very often, only when needed, and we are working to digitize them, so not only will we have less time physically touching the objects, but also that they can be more accessible to the public.
Is there anything in particular about these diaries that stands out to you?
Yeah, although there's a lot of very interesting entries, the part that struck me most interesting isn't actually the entries at all, but some of these pages are cut and torn out of the journal on purpose. So if you look at these pages here, we have 2 pages that have been purposely cut out, and then once you get closer to the back, a bunch of these pages have sections that are cut out. The ripped out pages in the diary are definitely one of my favorite parts of it because it really makes us think, why were these pages ripped or torn out purposely? Could it be because he tore them out himself? Could it be because command told him to, due to the fact that he wasn't allowed to have these diaries?
That's so intriguing, not only to wonder about why he would have had to rip those out, but also what it would have revealed.
Exactly, that's one of our biggest questions that we have with these diaries.
Are there any excerpts in particular that stand out to you?
Yeah, there's one in particular. So on January 22nd, 1918, he turns 21. And this entry really shows how the war has taken a toll on him. He's definitely more somber in his mood. So he states that he just remembered that I am 21 today. Oh, sorrow, how awful is it to be getting old. I am going to grow a beard or something soon. These diaries in particular give us great insight on the mental and emotional state of the servicemen during the war. In McDermott's diaries, particularly, we can see in the beginning he's very happy, very excited to be traveling, experiencing the world for the first time as a 17-year-old. But by the end of the war, we see his mood has drastically changed. He's much more sad, almost reluctant to make these journal entries. It's also interesting how we can see his tone of voice from the beginning of the war, 1914. He's very excited to be out on a ship, exploring new cities, to now he's a lot more sad, as I mentioned, and even his writing style has changed. It's gotten a lot sloppier. He's writing with pencil instead of pen, and there's a lot more drawings that we can see in here, which he could have used as more of an escape from his time at sea.
So he seems to be taking sort of less pride in a way in his keeping of the diary.
Yeah, that seems to be it, yeah.
You mentioned the drawings. I'd really love to see some of those.
Yeah, of course. So actually starting on the next page, we have a drawing here of a cap and sleeves and what I believe might be money. He could be talking about a higher up in command.
I wonder if those might be buttons on a double-breasted jacket.
It's a really good observation. It very well could be. It's what I love about these drawings. It is up for interpretation. The next page, we have a couple drawings of ships. Could be what he interpreted his ship to look like at sea or other ships he's seen in passing. And my favorite is his love interest at the back of the diary. This is a woman he was romantically involved in, we are assuming, and he might have drawn her to remember her during his time at sea. You can see who the person is behind the writing. McDermott mentions he receives letters from family members or friends, and he discusses some of his favorite things about his travels. You can really see who he was as a person rather than just a sailor.
Thank you so much for showing these to me today. It's been fascinating to look back and to get a glimpse into the mind of a young man at sea and see the toll that war has taken on him. It's particularly interesting because he is 21, as am I, and it's really hard to imagine being in his shoes.
Exactly, and we're so grateful that we get to share that with you because this is something that not many people know about. It's kind of an untapped part of history, and we're really lucky to have this in the collection, and we hope to collect many more in the future.
Absolutely.
These diaries are also rare because they weren't necessarily allowed to keep these diaries on board. It would give away details such as where they were and where they were going, so if they were ever captured, this information could be crucial to their enemies. Many soldiers of this time might not want to remember this history, so they either hide their diaries, get rid of them, or don't inform their family members that this history exists.
When we return, I'll examine the career of the decorated Brigadier General Ned Amy, a leader whose service was recognized with some of the country's highest military honors. At the Army Museum, I'm examining the uniforms of Brigadier General Ned Amy, a decorated Canadian military leader. These uniforms, accompanied by medals like the Distinguished Service Order and the Military Cross, symbolize his exceptional service and leadership. So Gary, we're going to look at some uniforms which belong to someone you actually knew.
That's right, Sandy. What we're going to look at today are some tunics that belong to the late Brigadier General Ned Amy. He was a member of the Board of Governors of the Army Museum, and when I first joined the board as a secretary, he was one of the governors, and I got to know him a little bit, and he was a fine gentleman. General Ned Amy was an officer in the Canadian Forces, in particular in the Canadian Armored Corps. He went to the Royal Military College of Canada in 1936, was commissioned in 39 into the Army, went to the Canadian Armored Corps School in Borden to be a tank commander and troop leader. He then went overseas, joined the Ontario Regiment as a troop leader, and then became a squadron commander. Then went to the Calgary Regiment Tanks, became squadron commander there. Then Northwest Europe and joined the Canadian Grenadier Guards, was squadron commander there as well. Subsequently took command of that regiment, returned home to Canada, where he became the commandant of the Canadian Armored Corps School. After that, he went to Korea, returned from the Korean War. He then went off to do various staff positions with NATO and in the Canadian Army headquarters. He was promoted to brigadier and was the brigade commander of 1 Canadian Infantry Brigade Group for a short period of time. Immediately after that, he went to command the 4th Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group in Germany. That was our NATO brigade there. After that, he was the 1st Canadian contingent commander. Returned to Canada, again, staff jobs in Ottawa, but then he resigned in 1972 because the government at the time had decided we would no longer have tanks in an armored corps, so in protest, he resigned. During that time, Edward was abbreviated to Ned. You could tell he was a very honest, humble man. I never once saw him wear his full-size medals, whether that was him being humble or that was just the reality of being of short stature, and his full-size medals would overwhelm a blazer.
We have 3 distinct jackets here in front of us. Could you walk me through each of them?
Sure thing, Sandy. So what we have are 2 examples of service dress and 1 example of a denizen smock, commonly referred to as parachute smock. So these all belong to General Amy. The 2 green ones are both post-unification tunics. And what I mean by that, in the late 60s, the 3 branches of the Canadian military, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, were unified into 1 force. And when that happened, we gave up the distinctive uniforms of those 3 environments and adopted 1 single rifle green uniform, which was this. What's unusual here in that this is a normal officer's tunic, with his rank on the shoulder as a brigadier general, and the braid here indicates he's a brigadier general, or a general, sorry. And then we have an unusual one here in that that's an outer tunic. It's not a shirt, but it's short sleeve. And then finally, his denizen smock. It's not that he was a parachutist in the Second World War, it's just that this was a really good piece of kit. And you can see by the wear on the cuffs there and on the base, on the hem on the bottom, he wore that a lot. He would have worn it in the field, and that was good because it was a waterproof item. It would go over your battle dress tunic and hide everything basically, and keep everything together. And it has 4 great big pockets, whereas the battle dress didn't. And you could carry maps, ammunition kit. So it was really, really good piece of equipment.
And how did these uniforms end up being here at the museum?
Well, General Amy was a member of our Board of Governors. He lived here in Halifax. He also was down Mahone Bay, Indian Point area as well. And so he was on the board, and he donated his uniforms to us. We also received his miniature medals, some other certificates, and that sort of thing. So we're quite fortunate that way. His medals, after he passed in 2011, went to the Royal Canadian Armored Corps School.
Gary, this is quite a grouping to see the Distinguished Service Order, the Order of the British Empire, and the Military Cross together like that. Could you walk me through the reasons for which General Amy was awarded each of those?
So for the Military Cross, he was a squadron commander in Italy with the Calgary Regiment tanks, and they were crossing the Moro River. And that was a especially difficult action. Anytime you're crossing a water obstacle with armored vehicles is always difficult. But that's also the action which I believe Captain Triquet from the Royal 22nd Regiment received a Victoria Cross. So this was a big deal. This was a hard-fought action, and he commanded his tanks. He got them over and did what he needed to do through his will and leadership, and made it a successful crossing. A good leader in Canadian Forces, Canadian Army, in any institution has to understand those that are working for him and leading by example and not asking his soldiers to do anything that he wouldn't do. He was a tank commander, so he was in his tank. He was leading his tank squadrons or tank troops or whatever. And so what he did, he expected his soldiers to do. And when his soldiers saw him perform, they would perform. And I think that's why he was very, very successful.
We spoke about the fact that General Amy was not a parachutist despite having the jacket. So why did he have his wings?
Well, that's a really good question, because General Amy was an Armored Corps officer, like tanks, reconnaissance. You normally think of jump wings with infantry. However, that doesn't stop other people from putting their names in to take the course. And it could have been something as simple as that, he had a break in service, like he was in between important jobs or whatever, and said, I want to see if I can do that. And went off and obviously did it.
Given what we've spoken about so far, that story certainly does not surprise me. General Amy certainly seems like a man of great courage and commitment.
Yeah, I agree, Sandy. It's, he served his nation for a long period of time. He did it well.
Tell me, Gary, what would you say was the lasting legacy of General Amy?
This is going to sound funny, but the lasting legacy of General Amy is at the Royal Canadian Armored Corps School in CFP Gagetown in New Brunswick. The Amy Tank Park is named after him, and this is an area in the field where the tanks are parked. We do maintenance there and that sort of thing. So there's two tank parks. One is the Worthington Tank Park, who is the founder of the Royal Canadian Armored Corps, and the other one is Amy. So the Royal Canadian Armored Corps felt he was so important that they named one of two tank parks in Gagetown after him.
Gary, thank you so much for bringing these out to show me today. It's been a privilege to be able to see these uniforms, to hear the legacy of General Amy, and to talk to someone who actually had the opportunity to know him.
Because of Ned Amy, and maybe the people in Sydney and in the North Shore of New Brunswick don't realize it, it was Ned Amy that got them their name back because he was successful in getting the Halifax rifles stood back up again.
Coming up, I'll take a closer look at the history of the Dambusters and their bouncing bomb. Learn why this technological marvel of the Second World War is still being talked about today. Today, we're exploring the story of the Dambusters raid. The innovative bouncing bomb was designed to skip across water and breach heavily fortified dams. This technology and its significant impact still captures the imagination of people today. I understand that one of the individuals that was actually on one of the Dambuster raids grew up just down the road from here, Mark.
That's right. Floyd Weil, who was from Scotch Village, which is just down the road, he was assigned to 617 Squadron in early 1943 as the crews were being developed, and 617 was brought on service only to initially attack the dams and became a specialized squadron from that point on, deploying various other types of weapons through there. Basically served a very intense operational campaign even prior to the dams raids. And he was paired up with a pilot called Bill Astle, and they flew B for Baker, which was their aircraft call sign on the side of their aircraft, the letter B.
Were many other Canadians involved with the Dambusters?
Yes, a significant number of crews were involved in the Dambuster raids. Weil was the only Nova Scotia. The others were from, obviously, Ontario and out west.
Of course, one of the things for which the Dambusters are best remembered is the innovative and quite novel way that they deployed the weapon. Can you talk to me more about that?
Yes, the weapon was known as upkeep, and essentially it was a depth charge. Obviously, with the Germans had actually fortified the dams because they expected them to be targets, so one of the reasons that they sort of thought the Allies would attack would be using torpedoes. So there were actually nets strung across the lake. Technical whizzes deciding on this decided that maybe we needed a weapon that was actually going to go over the nets, and how were we going to do it? And Barnes-Wallis designed this system, upkeep, to actually bounce over the water. But let me show you what upkeep really was. And we have actually got a model. We can actually show you what upkeep looked like.
Oh, I'd love to go see that.
Okay, well, let's go look at that. The upkeep weapon was designed by Sir Barnes-Wallis. Sir Barnes-Wallis was an inventor of many different aeronautical things, including airships. He created, obviously, the upkeep weapon and based it actually on the principle of bouncing balls across water. So what we see here is we can actually see underneath the depicts it as it was, which was basically in primer. A number of them actually weren't even painted. It was that quickly done. So the depth charge was attached with 2 cradles underneath in place of where the bomb bay doors were. A hydraulic motor spun the bomb to a certain speed. It was released at that speed, and then that would provide the backspin in order for the bomb to hit the water and then bounce. And once it bounced a number of times, it would actually stop and then drop, and then the hydrostatic fuse in the depth charge would explode at a certain point of that, and then theoretically the bomb would blow out the dam. The problem, of course, was the fact that they had to do this fairly low. They had to be very accurate, and the fact also was that the Germans were firing at them because there were anti-aircraft on the first dam. So it's very much a very tight, very risky operation. They knew the risk going into it, but at the same time, I think there was a surprise that they lost as many crews as they did.
What can you tell me about Operation Chastise?
Operation Chastise was the attack on the Mona, the Scorp, and the Ida Dam that 617 Squadron undertook on the night of May 16th, 17th, 1943. At that point, the intent purpose was to disable and take out dams that were providing hydroelectric power for the heart of the German industry, which was the Ruhr Valley. The force of 19 aircraft went out, only 11 came back.
So they really suffered quite devastating losses from this mission then.
Right, I mean, the 58 crew members were lost on the mission, so fairly significant number.
And were there any other earlier methods of attacking dams, or was this really quite an incredible innovation in terms of that sort of attack?
It was an innovation in a sense that no one had tried to bounce the bombs before. Obviously, there had been attacks, and obviously the Germans felt that the only way the British would attack would have been with torpedoes strapped to various aircraft trying to do it that way. At that point, they didn't have the range for torpedo-carrying aircraft, and it would have been a hard measure to sort of adapt to Lancaster to drop it effectively that way. The rotating depth charge was probably the first, it was a novel way to do it and deliver that explosive to the base to weaken that dam and hopefully make it, fall out.
Were they successful, Mark? Were the dams destroyed?
They were. They got, the Mona Dam was destroyed and it was taken out. The problem was that in relative sense, the Germans were quite quick to repair it, and they had the ability to repair it. And after that, they didn't expend any more time going after the dams at that point. The controversy surrounding the dams raid, though, is often looked at how much havoc was wreaked upon the German civilian population as well as the military establishment, and how effective really it was through it. Because again, by taking the dams out, you're unleashing massive amounts of water down various valleys, and there was civilian casualties even to this day that are controversial. The leader of the 617 Squadron, Wing Commander Guy Gibson, and Gibson was a 26-year-old who had been assigned to create the squadron and basically crew it up and bring people together to go out and do it. And unfortunately, Gibson was later killed during the war in 1944 on another mission, even though he shouldn't have been flying because he'd basically been time expired. For this particular award, he won the Victoria Cross, which was the highest level of bravery that he could receive for it.
Mark, thank you so much for taking me back through the history of the Dambuster raids and the innovation and technology that allowed them to carry it out. It was also so wonderful to be able to look back on Weil's story and to learn that there was a Nova Scotian involved in what is such an iconic part of the Second World War.
It certainly is a testament that we actually have a model like we have in front of us, and obviously his connection here to Stanley is important too, so it's a tribute to him.
It certainly is, and thank you for taking me through it.
Chastise was the first operational mission of 617 Squadron, but it's also the most famous mission, and even today it's widely regarded as one of the most daring and heroic bomber command missions of the Second World War.
Having special access to go beyond museum exhibits reveals some of history's best-kept secrets and most interesting stories. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of military artifacts on another episode of Militaria at the museum.